Everybody. And okay, so tonight's guest is the author William C. Grave, who will be telling us about his new book, The Lady in the Bay Window, a true story of a Sheffield haunted home. William's mum was diagnosed with a rare form of breast cancer 5 years ago, and feeling pretty helpless, he spent the first 2 years doing sponsored dog walks and managed to raise an impressive £3,000 for local cancer charities. After suffering an injury to his knee and having to undergo surgery, Will found that he had some time on his hands. And when he was asked by an old housemate if any spooky goings-on had happened recently in his home, he was able to answer that there most definitely had. He proceeded to tell a ghostly tale before having the idea of writing down the many occurrences which have occurred at number 333 over the past 18 years. Having worked full-time in the motor trade and never having written before, Will took 3 years to complete this self-published, best-selling paranormal book. All the proceeds go to the local cancer charity that helped his mother through the mental battle of her diagnosis and treatment. And in the 4 months since its release, the book has raised over £26,000 and has sold 6,200 copies worldwide. Will, you are very welcome to the ASSAP webinar for this evening.
Thank you for having me, and lovely to see most of you on the screen and to meet you all. So I've got to tell you about my haunted house, I believe. This all started back in November 2004. I was in the motor trade from being 15 years old. At the time, I was a 19-year-old, quite lanky, fresh-faced lad at the time, and I was actually engaged. My fiance at the time wanted us to spend my newfound wealth as I'd been promoted into the sales team. And back then you could earn a pretty penny in car sales. And she basically said, you should spend it on something worthwhile, like a house. I basically started searching for a house local to where I lived in Sheffield. And I found a property. Now, unfortunately, everything fell through on that property about a week before we were due to move in. And I got a phone call the next day while I was at work to state that another property had gone on the market in the same area from my fiance. I went to visit this house on a Friday night. It was November, so it was a pretty cold, dismal Friday night in Sheffield, and had a quick look from the outside and thought to myself, it looks like it needs a little bit of TLC, but I'll book in for a viewing the next day. The viewing went really well on the Saturday, and I took my fiance around the house, and we decided this was the house, we had to have it. Now, fast forward a week, I was going out on a Christmas do with some work colleagues at a place called Hollywood Bowl. We were going temping bowling, followed by a night on the town. I was sat at my mum and dad's house, which is literally 5 minutes around the corner from here. I'm sat in the haunted house as we speak, so if anything happens behind me, please raise a hand, because things do happen in the house and poltergeist activity, that sort of thing. But yes, fast forward a week, I'm going out on a Christmas do, and an old work colleague of mine pulled up outside my mum and dad's house. As I jumped in the car, he said, did you manage to get the other house? Did you buy the other house? I said, yeah, we're moving in a couple of weeks. It's around the corner. Do you want me to show you where it is? So he drove us around the corner, and as we pulled down, it's quite a steep road. As we pulled down the road, he pulled up on the left-hand side. I'm in the passenger seat, and I pointed up at the house and said, it's that one there, buddy. And he sort of bent his head down and looked up past me and looked at the house. Now, at this point, the house has been empty for 6 months. It had some renovation work done during that time, but there were no carpets, there was no heating, there was no furniture, there was no curtains. It was an empty shell of a house. And he pointed up at the house and said, oh, yeah, looks a lovely place. But who's the old lady in the bay window? And I looked across at him and I looked back at the house and I couldn't see anything. Now, bear in mind at this point, I'm a 19-year-old lad. I've never had anything paranormal happen to me. I'm a full-on skeptic. I've never had anything happen to me. So why would I believe in something that's never happened to me? I questioned him 2 or 3 times saying, it's that house there, it's number 333. Now, Craig, I've changed all the names and addresses in the book due to the nature of the book and it's still been my home. The lad I've called Craig in the book pointed an oil-stained finger as a mechanic up past my chest and said, are you sure it's that one there, number 333? And I said, yep, that's the one. He said, so who is the old lady in the bay window? And I looked back at him again, looked at the house. There was nobody there. There's nobody to be seen. And as we drove off down the road, I sort of couldn't let it go and just quizzed him and said, are you winding me up? Is this a practical joke or what? Who did you see in the window? And he said, there's an old lady, she's probably in her 80s. She had permed grey hair. She had a white blouse and she had a dark sort of cardigan jacket on over the blouse. And she was stood with her arms pressed against the top bay window, the bedroom, master bedroom as it is, sort of looking out at the car. And what stuck with me is the fact that he said that she had a real piercing stare and she was looking at us as if she didn't want us parking outside the house. Now, again, I didn't really think much of this. And why would I? As a skeptic, nothing's ever happened to me. I just kind of let it go and didn't think much of it. A week later, or a couple of weeks pass, and I finally got the keys to my new house. And on the day that I moved in, my fiance at the time said she didn't want to move in until we had furnitures and carpet and everything in the house. I, however, like a giddy young kid, 19-year-old lad, couldn't wait to get the keys and move in. So I went to the estate agents, grabbed the keys. They assured me that the previous homeowner, he'd only owned the house for 6 months and renovated it a little bit, that he wasn't going to be there and the keys had been handed in. I got to the house, parked outside, and I walked up what was a very steep pitted stone path up to the front door of the house. It was quite high above the roadside. And as you walk up the front path, there was an ancient looking sort of sundial in a garden to the left-hand side. And I walked up to the door, and as the keys were jangling in my hand, I could hear a bit of a commotion in the house. And I thought, what the hell is going on here? And I opened the door to confront whoever or whatever it was. And as I opened the next door out of the hallway into the front room, there was a large, bald-headed, muscular man walking towards me. And I sort of looked at him and said, whoa, who are you? And he said, oh, sorry, I'm ever so sorry. You must be Will. My name's Nick. I owned the house, but I only had it for sort of 6 months. I bought it to renovate it and sell on. And as he shook my hand, he then moved to one side, and a very well-dressed elderly lady with dark sort of long hair stepped forward, and she shook my hand and said, I'm Nick's mom. I used to live here. And she said, basically, Nick had bought the house for her. He'd renovated it for 2 months. She moved in and she looked me in the eye and said, I did live here. And then she whispered and said, something wasn't right. Now, this is my first couple of minutes in my new home. And I looked back at her and said, what do you mean something? And as I was starting to speak, Nick sort of bellowed out and said, Mother, leave him alone. Like, he doesn't want to be scared in his new house. And just like that, they left the house. I didn't get a chance to ask what she meant by something wasn't right. In the afternoon leading up, I sort of walked around the house and thought to myself what I'm going to do with the house, how I'm going to furnish it, what carpets am I going to lay. And then I phoned a few friends and thought I'll get a few friends around to have a beer with me. So I got on the phone. I managed to get in touch with 5 of the guys who I'd been to school with, so I'd known for years. And they all arrived in their taxis in droves at around 6, 7 o'clock that evening. And because I was young and naive, I didn't have a TV license. The only thing I had in the front room was a TV. That was it. There's no furniture in there. It was all old oak floorboards. You could actually see where the previous owner had varnished around a rug in the center of the room. And I borrowed the old Monopoly board game from my mum and dad's house, the original, the classic, and set it up where the rug used to lie in the front room. And all the guys came in, they put the beers in the fridge, we sat down, we were having a good evening, there was some good chat between us, we'd not seen each other for a while. And the game of Monopoly was about 2 hours in, when, as I was sat looking across at a friend of mine, and if you can imagine the front room, it's quite high ceilings, there's sort of a picture rail 3/4 of the way around the room. quite a large front room that was dominated by the bay window, to be fair, especially because there are no curtains up. And there are two doors, one to go to the kitchen and one to go to the hallway to go up to the stairs. In the far corner of the room, there was a small alcove, which now is decorated with shelving and things in there. But at the time, it's just an empty alcove. Now, because it was Christmas time, I'd set up a little, very cheap Christmas tree in the corner of the room. It's one of the first things I bought for the house, and just put that there. And it sat there and stood sort of twinkling its lights in the corner, looking very out of place in an empty room. But as you can imagine, 6 of us sat around this Monopoly board, 2 hours in, and I looked across at my friend who, Greg, is quite a stocky guy. He's not the sort of guy that you'd mess with, and I've known him since I was 11 years old. He's not somebody who'd tell a fib. And I watched him look over his shoulder. He looked over his right shoulder, and as he looked over his shoulder, he bolted across the board towards me. So I was looking directly at him. I saw him do this. He looked into the alcove in the corner of the room, and he bolted towards me, letting out a shriek as he went across the board, playing pieces, beers everywhere. The game was ruined. 2 hours of Monopoly, the arduous game of Monopoly, were ruined. And he sat behind me against the wall in sort of a fetus position. And I turned around. There was a lot of commotion going on because beers had been spilled and the game had been ruined. I said, what's going on? What's going on? And he couldn't speak. He just sat in a ball with his hands over his knees. And eventually I managed to get him up onto his feet, and I walked him into the kitchen alone and left the rest of the guys in the front room. And I said, what's just happened? What's going on? And he was pale as anything, eyes bulging out of his head. And he just said, "Did you not see her?" And I looked at him and said, Who have you seen? And he said, "The old lady sat in the corner of the room. She was sat on an invisible chair. She was just sat staring at me with a real piercing stare." And at this point, I put 2 and 2 together, because Craig, who was in the car a week prior, didn't know Greg. Craig was a work colleague. He'd never met Greg before. And Greg saying this to me, and I asked him to describe what this old lady looked like, and his description was pretty much to a T. It was a lady in her 70s, 80s. She had grey permed hair, a very piercing stare, a white blouse, a dark cardigan, and he could see that she had a long sort of dressy skirt on, dark dressy skirt, and she was just staring at him. Now, he had no reason to lie. He had no reason to be like that. He probably made a bit of a fool of himself, to be fair, in front of the rest of the guys in the front room. But he was freaked out, really, really scared. And this was the first night in my new home. Now, since this sighting of the lady we've come to know as Mrs. Tompkins, I've called her in the book, there was one lady, and the reason I say this is the house was built, I've done a bit of research on the history, it was built on March the 25th, 1936, and it was originally built as a council house. And the lady that I speak of, Mrs. Tompkins, she was a very well-to-do lady. She worked as a furrier, making and selling expensive fur coats. And she did pass away while she owned the house. We don't know if she actually died in the house, but we do know that her partner did die in the house. He died back here in his 50s, which was back in the 70s. So we know that he passed away in the house. But there have been 5 different sightings of said Mrs. Tompkins within the house from 4 different people who don't know each other or didn't know each other at the time. Which to me, as what was a skeptic, and I will sit here in front of you now and say, I am still quite skeptical. I'm a logical person. I look for the logical answer to things that happen in the house. But I've seen things, I've heard things with my own eyes, my own ears, that I cannot explain. There's just no way of explaining them. Now, the first thing that I saw with my own eyes was only a few years back now, to be fair. It was only about 3 or 4 years back. I was sat in the front room with my now wife. The fiance that I was with before, that didn't work out, and we ended up going our separate ways. And I've since married. Now, I've been married 4 years now. But I was sat with my wife one evening, and as we were on the couch in the front room, I'd poured her a glass of wine. It was about 10 o'clock at night, and we're sat next to each other. Now, bear in mind, my wife has seen Mrs. Tompkins twice, and I'll come back to that in a second. But I'm sat with her having a glass of wine. As we're sat there, the door handle to the bottom of the stairs, where we've seen shadows before, we've heard footsteps walk away after the shadows, and we've heard doors open and close upstairs from the same sort of remit happening at the same time. I sat there and saw the door handle. It's a spring-loaded door handle, so it's like a normal door handle with a spring load on it. The door handle came down, the door opened, and it came ajar probably 7 or 8 inches, just enough for me to sort of sit sideways on the sofa on the adjacent wall and look across. And as I put my head sideways and said, "Hello," the door handle snapped up and the door slammed shut. Now, at the time, my stepson, he's 19 now, he's just gone off to university, but at the time, he was upstairs in his bedroom. So my first thoughts were, it was him. There's somebody else in the house, it was him. But I jumped up off the sofa and ran 3 or 4 yards across the room and grabbed the door handle and looked upstairs into just a dark hallway up the staircase. There was nobody there. I ran up the stairs. I would have heard him run up the stairs. Without doubt, I would have heard him run up the stairs. And I'm a logical person, as I said before. But I went up into his room and questioned him. And he was sat with his headset on playing on his games console. There was no way that was him. I came back downstairs, and as I'm walking down the stairs, I'm thinking to myself in my head, how am I going to explain this to my wife? And what did she just see? Because I know what I saw. And I walked back into the front room and said, before I sit down, I'm just going to ask you what you saw. What did you see? Because this is the first thing I've seen with my own eyes. There's been plenty of things happen in the house, enough to do 25 chapters in a book over the years. But I stood in front of her and she said, I saw the door handle come down. It was a spring-loaded door handle. I saw the door open. And as you said, hello, the door handle came back up and the door slammed shut. She'd seen exactly what I'd seen. And I sit in front of you now, I cannot explain that. That happened, and it's unexplainable. What led me to write but in fact, I'll come back to this, but the other 2 sightings, you want to know about the other 2 sightings, don't you? That's probably, okay. So, there were actually 3 other sightings, but 2 by the same person. So my wife now, the first time we went out on a date, I went on a double date. So it was myself and her and my brother and his fiance at the time. And we went to a local casino for some food, had a great night. As we pulled up in the taxi outside the house, very similar to the first sighting this, I was trying to get some money out of my wallet to give to my brother because he was the second drop-off in the taxi. And my wife, who I've called Grace in the book, looked up at the house, looked up at the roadside, looked up at the house and said to me, who's the old lady in the bay window? Exactly the same as Craig had the week prior to me moving in the house. And I couldn't get the money out of my wallet quick enough because I wanted to see her. I've lived here 19 years. I haven't seen this apparition. I've seen things, I've heard things, I've not seen this apparition. But as I got out of the taxi, she could still see her, and I'm stood next to her looking up at the same window, and I cannot see this old lady. And I had to explain to her, this was one of the first times she'd been around to my house, I had to explain to her at this stage that my house is supposedly haunted. There are things that have happened here. People have seen this old lady. You're not the first and probably won't be the last to see her, which was an awkward conversation on a first proper date. But yeah, we did end up getting married. So it must have gone all right somewhere along the lines. The next to see her was my brother. Now, my brother is, I've written in the book that he was feared by many, or probably still is. He's 23 stone of muscle. He's 6'2". He's tattooed up to the nines. He's like the opposite of me. I'm a lover, not a fighter, and he's like the opposite of me. But he lived at my house for about a year while he was going for a divorce. Now, at the time, he'd been to the horse racing, and he told me he was going to be back in the early hours. And I had work the next day. I used to work every weekend, being in car sales at the time. I was a sales manager at the time, to be fair. And he came back at about 4 a.m. I didn't hear him come back in the house. the first thing I heard was a phone call on my phone from my brother, who doesn't show any emotion at all. And he didn't want me to write about this in the book, but it was such a poignant story that I had to. He phoned me and said, please come downstairs. And he could hardly get his words out. And I quite angrily said, I've got work in a couple of hours. Can this be left till tomorrow? And he said, no, I need you downstairs now. Please come downstairs. And he was sort of stuttering his words. I put my dressing gown on. I ran downstairs. I walked into the kitchen, and my brother was leant against the fridge in a very similar curled up position that I'd seen my friend Greg after the Monopoly incident. He had his hands over his legs. He was shaking. He'd gone deathly pale. And I said, what's wrong? What's happened? And he was staring up at the window. I just said, come on, tell me what's happened. And he said, I've seen her. I've seen the old lady. I said, what happened? Where did you see her? What happened? He said, she walked past. He'd seen a glow in the garden. He said he could see a white glow. They used to have a dartboard in the kitchen. It was a bit of a lad pad in my early 20s. There was a dartboard in there. He was throwing some darts, having a beer, and he saw a white glow sort of tracing across the garden. This white glow got closer, and as it got closer, he realised it was an old lady. And she sort of joined at the side of the window, walked past the window, stopped in the middle, turned her head and stared him straight in the eye with this piercing stare that everybody has gone on about that's seen her. And then she turned her head back again and walked straight through the wall into the neighbour's extension. And that was his sighting of her. And I had to sit with him for about an hour while he was sat on the floor, and he couldn't get up. He was just staring at the window where he'd seen this old lady. He was petrified. This is a guy that doesn't show fear at all. And as I said before, he's probably feared by many, to be fair. It's probably the opposite way around. And the last sighting of this apparition was my wife again. I'd gone out to meet a few friends. I think we'd gone to a pub quiz, and she was in the house for the first time alone on her own. We'd only been dating a few months, and I set off out of the house probably 8 o'clock that night. And about 9:30, I got a phone call from her screaming down the phone saying, you need to come home. Please come home now. She had got up from the sofa. She'd gone to the downstairs toilet, which to get to that, you'd walk from the living room through the kitchen. There was a door which went to a sort of lean-to utility room. And when I say lean-to, I really mean lean-to. It was... it had panels that were a little bit cracked and tiles missing from the ceiling. It needed replacing, which it has been now, to be fair. But as you walked into the lean-to utility room, you then turned back on yourself to go into the downstairs toilet. As she'd walked into the lean-to utility room, she looked up, and there was a glass pane bang in front of her. And she saw a reflection in the window that she very quickly realised wasn't her own reflection, and then realised it was somebody on the other side of the glass. My back garden is quite private. There's no way to get there unless you're climbing over very high fences or hedgerows. And she saw what appeared to be an old lady, the same old lady she'd seen in the window, but she had a nightdress on, a white nightdress, and she was staring straight back at her. My wife locked herself in the toilet for a good 10 minutes. She didn't have a phone with her. And once she got the courage, enough courage, she bolted back into the front room to phone me to say, please come home. You need to come home now. I've seen the old lady. So they're the 5 sightings of the old lady. You probably want to hear about the scariest things that have happened, I would have thought.
I think you should tell us everything, Will.
You'll not buy the book. So yes, one of the scariest things, and I still to this day, as I say, I'm a logical person, and just to let you know how I've written the book, after each chapter, there is what I've called William's Thoughts piece, where I try and explain what it could be from a skeptical, open-minded skeptic, I would call myself now, but I'll try and explain what has happened in each story and how you would look at it from a skeptical point of view and from an open-minded or believer point of view. I moved in a a friend of a friend, a lady was looking to rent a room in Sheffield. She'd just moved here and she was looking for a place to rent. I used to rent the rooms out quite a bit. And if you do read the book, you'll notice that it's been like a revolving door for friends to move in over the years and rent a room, which is why so many things, I believe, have been seen by differing people. The lady who moved in, I'd planned a bit of a housewarming for her, invited a few friends around. We had a barbecue and a few beers. And one of the guys said he was struggling to get a taxi home, but he was working the next day, and just said, do you mind if I put my head down on the sofa after everyone had left, all the last stragglers had left the house? And he said, do you mind if I put my head down on the sofa and I'll order a taxi first thing? And I just said, yep, not a problem. It's the early hours. It was probably three o'clock in the morning. I just said, look, I'm going to go to bed. And so is the new lady who's moved in. She's going to go to bed too. You just put your head down on the sofa and leave in the morning. The keys are in the back of the door. Now, at 9 o'clock the next morning, I was a little bit hungover, and I did hear the front door. I heard a black cab outside, and I heard the front door slam shut. And I heard that like it was yesterday. I heard the front door slam shut. About 2 hours later, it was about 11 o'clock. I wish I got lines like this now. I've got a 10-month-old son. This doesn't happen anymore. But about 11 o'clock, I woke up with a bit of a sore head, and I got to the top of the stairs, and I was going downstairs to get a glass of water. And as I looked up, I saw that the front door was ajar. It wasn't shut, but it wasn't fully open. It was just sort of a couple of inches ajar. And I feared the worst. I thought, somebody has broken into my house. This is going to be a nightmare. And I ran down the stairs. I opened the door, and the first thing I checked, is my car still there? My car was there. But as I opened the door, I looked down and I saw on the floor, all the bag of the lady who'd moved in was strewn out on the floor with all the contents just laid next to it. And we're talking makeup, cigarettes, keys, all sorts of things that were just strewn out of the bag. And I kind of looked at that and thought, that's weird that somebody would do that and leave everything there. Her purse was there as well. But I ran back upstairs to grab her and said, you've got to come downstairs. I think the house has been broken into. I've not checked the rest of the house yet, but I've seen your bag outside. And I helped her pick up the contents of a bag. And she looked me in the eyes and said, nothing's been stolen, which is very, very strange for somebody to, on a Sunday. It's quite a quiet area where I live as well. It's quite a nice area. Touch wood, apart from the paranormal things, I've never had anything strange happen, i.e. burglaries, anything like that. It's a nice area. And I walked back in the house, so scratching my head, thinking that's very strange. Opened the door to the front room and saw something that this was probably definitely the freakiest thing I'd seen. There were 5 cooking knives across the door, sort of foot of the door, in size order, all evenly spaced across the foot of the door to the kitchen. And they were driven into the oak floorboards. So the original oak floorboards that I said where the rug used to lay and somebody had varnished around it, I'd sanded these down and varnished them myself. So they look beautiful oak floorboards. And somebody had driven knives, I'm talking 2 inches deep, into the floor. Now, I know how dense that oak is. To get knives into this, you would have to have a hammer, I would have thought, to hammer them into the floor. Now, I was asleep in the bedroom above this and didn't hear a beat. I heard when the taxi pulled up outside, I heard him slam the door, but I didn't hear anybody doing anything of the sort. More to the fact, why would somebody break into your house on a Sunday and start driving knives into your floor? Is probably the better question. But I stepped over the knives, fearing that something worse had happened or whatever. I don't know what could be worse than that. But as I walked into the kitchen, the knife block where my kitchen knife should have been was empty because they were in the floor. There were 2 cupboard doors open and the cutlery drawer was open. There was nothing missing. I went round the rest of the house. There was nothing missing from the house. Just these 5 knives driven into the floor and this bag strewn outside the front of the house. Now, in the book, I've left that very open to people to think what you think. In my head, as a skeptical-minded person, a logical person, somebody could have walked in my house in that 2-hour window from 9 to 11 o'clock and done that. How they would have done it without me waking up is another question, but it could potentially not be paranormal, but it's certainly a freaky incident, whichever way you look at it. But I think the scariest night for me was I was in between housemates at the time. So, as I said to you before, people used to rent the rooms, and there was nobody living at the house at the time. Now, my mum and dad used to go on quite a few abroad holidays before my mum was poorly. As I say, she had cancer for the past 5 years, bless her. But before she was poorly, they used to go away quite a few times abroad. And one of the favourite jaunts was Fuerteventura. And every time they went away, they had a beautiful border collie dog called Guinness. And they would bring her around to my house, and I'd look after her for the week or two while they were away. And she was the best dog. Everybody loved her. She was so well behaved. Are you able to sorry. But yeah, she was so well behaved. Everybody loved her. So this particular week, my dad had dropped her off with enough treats and her lead and all the food and everything. And I was laid down one night, got to about 11 o'clock, and I looked at the dog, and she sort of looked up at me with her doting eyes, and I said, "Come on, pal, it's bedtime, let's go to bed." And she sort of wagged her tail, and we set off to go upstairs. Now, in the front room, I'd turned the television off, and I used to have a tall IKEA lamp that was about 6 foot tall, sort of, it had like a paper mache look to it on the outside. It's a wireframe with sort of paper mache look to it, and it sort of softly illuminated the room. But it had a push pedal. It was just one light bulb. It had a push pedal on the floor. Now, I'd walked up to it, as I did every other night, and I pressed the foot pedal, and the lamp stayed on. I looked at it and thought, oh no, my lamp's broken. I'm going to have to get a new lamp at some point. But I walked over to where the plug socket was. I traced the wire back to the wall. It's just behind the sofa. And I turned the plug off, and I turned around. The lamp was still on. I pulled the plug out, and I stood in the centre of the room with the plug going down to the foot pedal. There's no other wires near me, going to the lamp, and the lamp remained on. And I took a photo of it, and I sent it to a good friend of mine who's an electrician, saying, "Tell me that this can happen. Like this must be there's a logical reason why this can stay on and not go off." And he very quickly phoned me and said, "No, how have you done that? How have you managed to make the lamp do that?" So, no idea. I've just literally tried to turn it off and it stayed on. And he said, "Well, they don't have an internal power source. There's no possible way that lamp can stay on." I was tired at the time. I thanked him for phoning me very quickly, and I put the phone down. And this is where things got a little bit weirder. I put the plug down on the floor, the lamp stayed on, and I went up to bed. Now, Guinness, every night when she stopped here, or when she stopped at my mum and dad's, she would sit on the top step with her paws over the top step, sort of under her chin, and she would guard the stairs. That was her sleeping position for the night. And she wouldn't move. She would wait until you got up in the morning, and then she'd sort of wag her tail and you'd be off and downstairs. She'd follow you all around the house. But at night time, if anyone was in bed, she would guard the stairs with her chin on her paws. This particular night was exactly the same. She walked up to the top of the stairs. I said goodnight to her. I walked into my bedroom. And normally, 99 times out of 100, I would close my bedroom door because we do hear footsteps during the night a lot. So I would very often close my bedroom door because I don't want to be hearing that in the middle of the night. This particular night, for some reason, I didn't. The door was just left ajar, and there were sort of slithers of light going across the bottom of the foot of the bed from the top of the stairs, where there's a street lamp outside and the window there. So I'm laid there, and I started to hear a shuffling sound. Now, this noise that I could hear is the noise. I knew straight away what it was. It was Guinness's hindquarters. If you offered her a treat, or you said, sort of, "Come here," if you called her, she would sort of wave her hindquarters. She'd wag her tail that hard that she'd wave her hindquarters, and that was the noise I could hear while I was laid in bed alone in the house, apart from the dog. And as this happened, I literally was laid just about to speak. I was about to open my mouth to say, "Do you want to come in here and sleep on the foot of the bed?" As I opened my mouth, I heard a gent's voice. It was definitely a male voice. And it came from the staircase, and it whispered. I've put in the book that it whispered loudly. I know that sounds strange, but it was like a "come here" sort of really creepy voice. And it's making the hairs on my arm stand up now. As I said to you, this was the most scary thing that happened to me in the whole of the book. The rest of the stories are about other people, really. But this, literally, I froze. I was laid in bed, I froze, I couldn't move for what felt like an eternity, but it wasn't. It was probably split seconds before I then realised somebody's burgling me. There's somebody in the house. I'm a logical person. I'm thinking there's definitely somebody in my house. I've just heard the voice. Guinness has heard them. She's looking at them on the stairs. I jumped up out of bed and I did what anybody else would try and do. I looked for a weapon at this point, and I couldn't see anything around the room. And I went into my wardrobe and I pulled all the clothes out and grabbed I don't know what this was going to do, but a hollow metal bar from the top of the wardrobe, what the clothes were hanging on. And I walked out onto the landing, stood in my boxer shorts at the top of the landing next to the dog who's staring downstairs. And I looked over the banister into pretty much darkness, and there was nobody there. The dog was still wagging a tail. Guinness is still there wagging a tail, looking down the stairs. She took no notice of me. I walked down the stairs, walked over the dog, walked downstairs. She would follow me everywhere. She didn't follow me. Whatever was downstairs, she wanted nothing to do with it. At the bottom of the stairs, I had a golf bag, and I picked out the 7-iron out of the golf bag. Never miss anything with the 7-iron. And I proceeded to go into the front room, and I went around the whole house. I checked all the windows, all the doors. I checked in every single room with the golf club held high, thinking somebody was in the house. And I eventually retired to the front room and sat on the sofa for a good half an hour, still with the golf club clenched in my hand, and the dog still at the top of the stairs, who didn't want to come downstairs and face whatever was down there. There was nobody in my house. There was no way anybody could get out of my house. That was 100% paranormal, and it really, really scared me to death. That was the scariest thing for me personally. But yeah, that was that. And the last story that I will tell you is the reason why I kind of wrote this book. I was sat, this was only a couple of years back. We were doing some renovation work on the house, and a good friend of mine, it was when I first did my knee. So we're talking three and a half years ago. I was doing all sponsored dog walks. I'd raised £3,000 for a local cancer charity in the name of my mom, who was got a rare stage 4 breast cancer at the time. And I had to have an operation on my knee. So I was laid up at home. A good friend of mine that used to live here came round with one of the other lads. He was doing some work outside while the other guy was keeping me company watching the football one Sunday afternoon. And he looked at me when he came in, the electrician, and said, "Come on then, has anything strange happened lately? Anything spooky? Because things have happened to him. I've written about him in the book." I said, "Yeah, actually, there has been something last week. This was really weird, and it's one of the first poltergeist things that I've seen or has happened to me personally, which made it even stranger." But on the Friday prior to that, I'd gone to go to bed on a Friday night. I'd gone to put the dogs away, so I was probably half an hour behind my wife going up to bed. So she'd got in bed. I walked upstairs into the bedroom. There's nothing on the floor in the bedroom. I was just getting undressed to get into bed. And I looked down and saw a strange bronze coin. And I bent down, picked it up, and it was an American 1-cent coin, American 1-cent piece. And for some reason, I looked at the date on it, and the date was 2014. And I didn't think much of it, apart from the fact of, why is there an American 1-cent coin in my house? And I put it in my bedside table, top drawer where my socks are. And I got in bed, went to sleep, normal night. The following day, the Saturday, my wife had gone to bed about an hour before me. I was just finishing off watching something on the television. I put the dogs away. I went up to go to bed, and she was pretty much asleep at the time. As I walked into the bedroom, the exact same spot on the floor, just as I was about to get undressed, a bronze coin sat in exactly the same spot. And I bent down, picked it up. It said 2014 on it. My first thoughts were, is it the same coin? I opened the drawer. I took all my socks out. There was only that coin. The other coin had disappeared, so it must have been, I'm presuming it was the same coin. A bit freaked out by this, I sort of awoke my wife and said, "Any ideas how this has got it?" There's only her in the house at this point because my stepson had gone off to university. So I'm kind of, any ideas how this has got here? And she just said, no idea, not got a clue. Don't worry about it. Just get in bed. So I put the coin back in my top drawer. That was on Saturday. So this has happened Friday, Saturday. Sunday, I hoovered the whole house, paranoid that I was going to find this coin again somehow. I hoovered the whole house and went to bed that evening, knowing full well that it wasn't on the bedroom floor. I walked up the stairs. As I got about halfway up the stairs, a 2014 American 1-cent piece is sat right in the middle of the staircase. I bent down, picked it up, walked into the bedroom and said to my wife, you must be winding me up now. You have to have put this here. Now, she's not a practical joker, and the paranormal things that happen in the house do really freak her out. And she just said, I've not put it there. It's nothing to do with me, but you have just woke me up. So give me the coin. And she took the coin and she put it on her bedside table. Now, this is where Mrs. Tompkins has been seen in the window twice before. She put it on a bedside table and said, I'll leave it here. Now, this is where things get a little bit weird. I woke up I went to bed that night actually Googling why am I finding American 1-cent coins in my house. And the general consensus was that there were people who were spiritualist people stating that it means that somebody from America is coming to visit you. Now, a good friend of mine, I was actually out visiting him last week, used to live here, and he was coming back for the first time from America with his new girlfriend the following week and would be stopping with me. So that was a little bit weird to read that. But again, I went to sleep. I woke up on the Monday morning. So that's happened Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Monday morning, I got up, I walked around the bed, I picked up my towel, I went into the bathroom, and our bathroom, it's got a bath in there with the shower in the bath. And it's sort of a glass casing around it. So you can see if somebody else had walked in the bathroom, you'd be able to see. But I shut the bathroom door. I got in the shower. As I'm stood there, I'm thinking about this coin, as probably anyone would be when that's happened to them 3 days on the bounce. And just some thinking about it, something hit me quite hard on the back of the calf, like it had been thrown at with some force. And I heard the noise of something metallic hitting the bottom of the bath. And I knew what it was going to be before I even looked down. And I bent down and picked it up, and it was a 2014 American 1-cent piece. Now, most people would probably be freaked out by that. I've lived in this house now 19 years, and not many things have actually happened to me personally. It's been to other people. So I was quite excited. I jumped out the bath, wrapped my towel around me. I'd not finished sort of shampooing my hair still at the time. Ran out the bath, ran into the bedroom and said to my wife, look on your bedside table, is that coin there? And she said, no, it's gone. And I went, that's because it's here. And I stood holding it. And I put it on my bedside table. I took a photo of it and we were discussing it. And I had to go and finish off my shower and get the shampoo out of my hair and things. But about an hour later, I'd done a Teams call for work. I was sat in this office, which I'm in now, done a Teams call for work. I went to go and get a cup of tea. And I phoned my dad to tell him he's interested in loads of paranormal things and got loads of unexplained books and things that he used to collect. And I phoned him to tell him about it. And he said, well, where's the coin now? I said, well, I've taken a photo of it. It's on the bedside table. Just the coin on a mirrored table with a few droplets of water around it. I said, it should still be up there. And he said, well, go and find out while I'm on the phone with you. Go and see if it's still there. I ran upstairs. I looked on the bedside table and I went, yeah, it's there. And I've got the phone to my ear. And I sort of rolled it into the palm of my hand. And as I rolled it into the palm of my hand, there were 2 American 1-cent coins. Now, I know full well there was only 1 American 1-cent coin. But as I did that, there were 2. One dated 2012 and one dated 2014. Now, if I take you back to me having this conversation and telling my 2 friends about this paranormal event the week after, I'm sat in the front room, I'm telling them the story. And the chap I've called Doug in the book, who used to live here, who's had things happen to him, was going very pale as I was telling the story. And I said, what's wrong? Why have you gone so pale? You look worried. He said, what day was I here doing the first fix on the electrics? I said, that was last Sunday, the day before the coin was thrown at me. He said, okay, this is going to freak you out. He said, I got home that night and he wears, these Snickers sort of work trousers with the pockets down the side, like combat sort of trousers, I would call them. He wears those and his wife washes them every Sunday for him. He's an electrician, washes them every Sunday, but she goes to empty the pockets in case he's left his tools in there. Doesn't carry any money on him at work. but in case he's got any tools in there. And she emptied the pockets. There was one thing in all the pockets. It was an American 1-cent piece.
That's amazing, Will. Firstly, thank you very much for the talk
That's
this
okay.
evening. I know I'm very aware that you need to be away by 8 o'clock, so you timed it perfectly, Will. Over 60 people in the room tonight, and
Wow.
excellent turnout. And for those that had their cameras on, I could see that they were absolutely glued to their screens as well. So on that basis alone, if you do write another book, then we need to be your first stop when you start the tour afterwards.
Yeah, that's cool. That's not a problem.
There are some questions, Will. Are you okay for a little bit of
Yeah,
time
honestly,
just
I
to take
said
some
I'd be away
questions?
at 8. I've probably got till 10 past ish, to be fair. So
Okay,
yeah,
no,
I'm
fair
fully there.
dues. I'm going to see, because my throat is on its way out, but I'm just going to see whether one of the others can take the questions. I did ask Christian in the chat, but he didn't pick up on it. Stu, might you be able to do questions for us?
Yeah, no problem. Hang on one
Thanks,
second.
buddy.
I'll have to scroll back. Hang on.
Yeah, sure.
Here we go. Okay. Here we go. I'll go through all the evenings. There's an awful lot of evenings, and it's wet outside. Oh, it's dry outside here. It's cold. No, it's not. It's lovely. Right. Okay. First thing from Kaz. I feel that she lived there because this was her house and her husband died there. My house in Wakefield has a man from the 1920s whose wife died in the dining room. He stays in there, thinks he's watching over his wife. I try to send him over, but he won't go.
Yeah, well, in the book, I actually had a medium visit the house. I didn't tell him my name. I told him my name was Mr. G. I didn't tell him my name or the address. I gave him my phone number and gave him the first 3 digits of the postcode and guided him in, because I didn't want the skeptic side of me, didn't want him to know anything about the house. He did say on that day, "Do you want me to send any of the spirits on?" He also said there was a vortex in the house, which I didn't know what a vortex was until after the event. And it was in the master bedroom of all places, which was lovely to hear. But yeah, he did say, "Do you want me to send any spirits on?" There was one spirit that he wanted to send on, because he said there's a guy looking for his partner. And I know that Mrs. Tompkins wasn't married. She had a partner. So that potentially could be something. But we also had a paranormal investigation crew in as well on a separate day that did. That was a bit of a wild night for somebody like myself to witness. Very crazy. But I videoed the whole thing.
Well, the next question is actually, you got any photos of these incidents, or are they in the book?
There's a couple of videos that are on the page. So if you go to the Facebook page, The Lady in the Bay Window, you'll find a few videos on there. The photo of the lamp, unfortunately not. That was quite a few years ago. It was on a very old phone. So unfortunately, at that stage, I didn't realize I was going to be writing a book about the paranormal events in my house at any time. So no, that I didn't save that, but it's there. And there was actually another photo that I wish I had this one. I had a phone stolen many, many moons ago in my early 20s. I'll save you that story. You can read that in the book if you like. But there's a crazy, crazy photo that I took. But yeah, you can find The Lady in the Bay Window on Facebook. You'll find some bits on there.
Okay. Right. Okay, then. So, second, just scrolling through. It's still a lot of good evenings. A lot of people arrived a little bit late by the looks of things. Preemptive question: were all the sightings in the same place? Pertinent question: who owned Park Lane / Mayfair in the Monopoly game?
All the hauntings weren't in the same room. There are some hot spots in the house, if you like, where we've seen a shadow go under the same door quite a few times. There's been footsteps behind that door quite a few times. The issue is every time you try and investigate these footsteps, if you're upstairs, they're happening downstairs. If you're downstairs, they're happening upstairs. And if you try and investigate them, they stop straight away. And one of the videos that I've got on Facebook is of some knocking noises where I ask out and it very clearly answers me. To which my wife sat next to me said, "Stop now, don't ask anymore. You can't do this." Yeah, it really freaks her out.
And next question: are you actually sitting in the house now?
I am. So I'm in my stepson's now gone to university, so I've set up a very nice office in what was his bedroom. And I do work from home every now and again. So yes, I am sat in the house now.
Okay. Yeah. Question from Aisling. Was she giving off bad vibes to make everybody terrified of her? do you think?
Potentially. And there's a piece that I put in the book, actually, that it seems to be that she appears for, I know she's appeared in front of a couple of the guys before, but mainly women. Things happen really freakishly to women that come in the house. So potentially, yeah.
Okay. Did you keep a diary of all the incidents to see if there's any patterns? And have you looked at the history, the layout of the house and so forth?
Yes. Yeah, I can't find anything historically. There's nothing special about it. It's a 3-bed semi-detached house. It's not a huge house. It's a nice family home. It shouldn't be very special at all, but there seems to be something very strange going on here that a lot of people have witnessed. And it's not just me going crackers. There are stories in the book where there's 6 people there that have witnessed things. On 2 occasions, there's been 6 people there. So it's not just me making stories up. It's these things are happening.
Yeah. Okie dokie. So more. Have the sightings coincided with any repairs, renovations?
Yes, some of them, yeah. So we spent 3 years renovating the house. We had a couple of scared workers working here at one time that didn't know the house was haunted, but they certainly did after the first day working here, which is strange because things don't happen here all the time. They tend to happen every couple of months, and we'll have a week. We call it the week of madness. We have 2 months of nothing, and then we have a week of madness where everything happens in a week. So it's strange for them to witness things on the first day and question me about it on the second morning they're working here.
Okay. Liz, has this been investigated by any paranormal groups? And wow.
Yes, certainly has. And I've written about it in the book as well. So the whole thing was caught on video. It's a team called Awakening the Paranormal. Really nice bunch of people, to be fair, very respectful. There's one thing that I said that I didn't want was a Ouija board doing in the house. And I know, coming from an open-minded skeptic, that sounds crazy because I should be sat here saying you can do whatever you want in my house, but it's my home. I didn't want to unveil something that didn't want to be brought in, if you like.
Sure, I've got some. As a Yorkshireman, presumably the IKEA lamp which lit itself up with no power did appeal to you on a certain level. I imagine.
It definitely did. Yeah, it did. I was
I'm
very,
okay, thank you. Yes.
I was very disappointed to wake up the next
I'm
day.
just having a cup of tea.
We're being haunted by Alan Moody by the sound of things. That's ironic. Being haunted by Alan Moody, bloody hell, that's ironic. Anyway, right, moving on. Haunted IKEA. It wasn't called a sort of IKEA phantom or something, was it? It was actually...
I don't think so. No, I'd had it for many years, and it very quickly went in the bin a few weeks after that, a few days after that.
As indeed do a lot of IKEA lamps, actually, in my experience, I have to say, definitely. Where are we? Right, okay. The coin sounds weirdly specific, a 2014 1-cent coin. Any connection you're aware of with Mrs. Tompkins in the USA? Not with Mrs.
Tompkins, but as I said, during that, a good friend of mine that used to live here was coming back the week after for the first time. So that is very strange that he was coming to stay here the week after. And when I read up online, a lot of people were saying finding American coins around your house in the UK means somebody from America is coming to visit you. It was quite strange.
So what happens to the haunted money? Have you exchanged it since, or have you kept it as a lucky token?
I've still got it. Yeah, I've got all 3 of them. We did actually have one go missing for a little while, which reappeared back where it was. And we have that with things in the house. I've had that. My granddad's watch has gone missing before, and we've tipped the house upside down to try and find it, only to find it back in the box where it was. Very, very strange things like that happen.
That's a photo, but yeah, I mean, just to pick up on that, we had a conversation on here not so long ago where there might be a lot of micro things like this happening in a lot of places, but you just don't think of it. You think, I must have put my keys down, I must have put them somewhere else. Yeah. Whereas if you're focused on it might happen, then you're more likely to notice it happening, if that makes sense, sort of thing.
Well, I was devastated because I had a call from somebody called Blumhouse Films, the big Hollywood company, wanted to do something, look at buying the TV and film rights, and they'd read the book. And he said, have you got the coins? And I went to go and get the coins, and that's when I couldn't find the 3rd coin. And it's reappeared since. So very, very strange. And I keep it in a little metal pot. It's out of reach of anybody. Yeah, very strange.
Weird. And if that's 3 coins, because they quite often have that mystical property, don't they? 3 coins in the fountain, the Yi Jing, you throw in 3 coins, that kind of stuff. And as Reverend Alison Shane points out, you're in house number 333, which is kind of like
it's not. It isn't actually 333. I changed the name and address, all the names and address. I mean, my name's not William C. Grave. It's actually Liam. I changed all the names and the address for the book, but I chose 333.
Okay, fair enough.
I didn't want to go 666. That was a bit much.
Yeah, that would be pushing it.
I went halfway.
It's a shame it didn't do that doubling trick with $100 bill, says Edward.
I know, yeah.
Right, yeah.
My dad actually did say when he was on the phone to me, if this carries on, you'll be a millionaire. When the second coin appeared.
No, lots and lots of thanks, because by that time we'd finished. Thanks for this evening's talk. Great, really exciting. It's good to hear. You do appear to have been in a state of undress or in the bath or the shower quite a lot of the time. Have you still got the towels?
Yes, I'm still. Well, probably might be different ones now. I'm married now; they get changed quite often. So, yeah.
Yeah, you haven't got the box of shorts sort of framed up on a wall or anything like that.
That's strange. We were talking about actually doing some framing of the books. So I've literally gone and bought a frame today for the first edition of the book.
Right, not the boxer shorts, though.
Not the boxer shorts, but I might put the coins in.
A bigger frame, you can put them side by side, Be all right. Fascinating. Darren Hudson, following on just what you just said, a fascinating experience. Have you or your family had any of your belongings go missing and subsequently reappear? Yeah, that sounds like that.
Yeah, plenty and quite often. And it first of all, when we first got together, myself and the girlfriend or wife now, there's a lot of finger pointing at each other. And I just said, look, this happened. It's happened. I've been in 19 years now. This stuff happens. It's not me. Yeah. Things go missing and they will reappear.
Yeah. Wow, it's amazing. So the very last thing, any decorating or building work disturbs the energy in the house, especially with a portal in your house. Well, yeah, I mean, that's, all right. Not necessarily the same thing, unless you're opening a portal by knocking down a wall or something.
We renovated the whole house over 3 years. And then when we finished, I decided actually the kitchen wasn't quite big enough. I wanted to be able to host sort of family dinners and things. So we knocked the back wall of the house out and had an extension built on as well. So renovation work, yes, the whole thing in the last 4 years, new ceilings, new wiring, new boiler, new everything. Lots. And we've still got paranormal going on.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Nice. That's the end of the questions.
Thank you, Stu. Thanks for doing that. My voice box thanks you as well. Will, just very quickly before we let you go, would you just remind us of the name of the book and where we can get it from, please?
Yeah, of course I can. It's called The Lady in the Bay Window. If you go onto Amazon, it's actually an Amazon bestseller. I don't know how. I only wanted to sell 400 books and raise £2,500 for this cancer charity. It's just done over £26,000 and 6,600 books. So please go onto Amazon. It's called The Lady in the Bay Window. You'll find it on there. And every single penny from every single book sale go directly to the cancer charity. And I'm currently doing the audiobook at the minute, which I'm about halfway through, which will be on Audible at some stage in the next month or so.
The link is in the box below, and I'll post it again on the Facebook page.
Cool. Yeah, that's fine. But if you want to find it on Facebook and find any of the videos or any more information, you can certainly find The Lady in the Bay Window on there if you're on social media.
Top man, thank you very much. And we'll let you crack on and do what you've got to do, Will. But from everybody, thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you for having me, guys. Really appreciate it.
Excellent. Claire.